And welcome back, trainers, to Victory Road's World Championships VGC side stream. We get to feature an exclusive top 8 match here again after just having featured one before. I am Hayden McTavish, and I'm joined by Tyson Hughes. We're really excited to get to cast this. How are you doing, Tyson?
Well, really excited to cast this, but really excited to get to introduce ourselves after that quick match there that we had in top 8. But we have another explosive match for you guys here today. James Evans versus Tsukide. Both Hayden, as you just previously mentioned, former world championships or champions. And that's super exciting to see. Again, that high level talent that we keep emphasizing, to have the pinnacle of it, the people who've actually won that level of event before, face off. And what I would argue is a pretty early part of the bracket as well. It's not just finals yet, and you're not just there yet in this top 8 game. So you're really fighting tooth and nail here. But we're going to be getting right into the action as we preview their teams here. And to talk about them is going to be super exciting. And I'm really happy to highlight, what these two previous world champions have cooked up.
Yeah, absolutely. So on one side, with James Evans, I believe, we have the Calyrex. Oh, no, it's James Beck. Gonna read through Tsukide's team first. I think we have a quick update we need to do of our team sheets. But Tsukide's team, we featured before. It was just on the mainstream. It's one of those standard compositions with Lunala, Miraidon, Incineroar, Urshifu, Whimsicott, and Ursaluna, but with a couple of really interesting techs that Tsukide has really been showing us through this whole tournament. We see that Miraidon has a Life Orb, so it has that ability to go for a Draco Meteor and then pivot a little bit. Now we're going to be able to feature that other side. We've got James Evans' team, still the Calyrex, Shadow Rider, and a Koraidon, but with that Brute Bonnet being able to take advantage of the sun, one of my favorite Pokemon in this new generation. Really excited to be seeing that. And a nice Incineroar, Raging Bolt, Landorus, some standard, really heavy-hitting composition elements that James has.
And I think this is a perfect blend of new and old from both players there. We talked about how prevalent Miraidon has been this entire format, how dominant of a restricted it is. And even with the small changes, we highlighted Ko's team a lot yesterday, especially with that Life Orb Miraidon having the option to protect that small bit, I guess, has given Ko this huge edge to make their way into top 8 of the World Championships. But James bringing a blast from the past. Yes, it's a new Pokemon, but the whole thing with Koraidon is that he's one of the past Pokemon. And Koraidon bringing the sun there, I think having the other restricted from Scarlet and Violet, that being the Koraidon instead of the Miraidon, I think it's a cool meta change that we really get to see here at Worlds. I mean, Giovanni last game we saw the Koraidon. This game we're going to get to see the Koraidon paired with a different Psychic and Ghost type, but I think that's also another common theme, is that Psychic and Ghost type. But a lot of differences between the teams and maybe how they're composed in terms of Sun, but those differences, I think, are what's going to make or break this matchup. Even something like the Brute Bonnet there, being the Pokemon of choice, having access to that Spore, and unlike a Moongus, also getting access to the Photosynthesis, being able to use your Koraidon just that much more, get that much more value out of it.
Yeah, there's definitely a whole lot of Pokemon on James Evans' side that are built to take advantage of this sun. The Raging Bolt and the Brute Bonnet, both with those nice Photosynthesis boosts. And then, as you mentioned, I think it's just wonderful to shout out. We've got both players decided, all right, we're previous Senior Division World Champions. We need to use a Scarlet and Violet restricted and a Ghost Psychic type. And that's their composition for both sides. We've got the Calyrex and Koraidon and the Lunala and Miraidon. I think that, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how these match up. But both of those restricteds have a ton of damage into each other. Koraidon and Miraidon can trade pretty explosively, as can Calyrex and Lunala. So it's going to be really interesting to see when and how these players use their restricted Pokemon versus relying on those other Pokemon that can maybe take advantage of the sun in James Evans' case, or provide a lot of speed control in Tsukide's case, just to shout out the nice Whimsicott Tailwind option that's there. And then, of course, there's always the Incineroars on both sides, being able to provide some fake-out pressure and try to be the glue to coordinate these different, very explosive potential positions.
And I think even more than glue on James Evans' side, for example, we actually see a sneaky helping hand making its way onto that Incineroar there, helping boost the explosive power of James Evans' teams even more, boosting up things like a potential Astral Barrage or a Collision Course from the Koraidon, boosting that power even more, while Ko doesn't necessarily have that option. Instead, you have a lot of your power just built in with the Life Orb on the Miraidon as well as Terrain, and then you have things like Ursaluna in Trick Room that, do so much damage if James doesn't pivot out the Incineroar to maybe reset the Intimidate as well. We don't want to forget the Raging Bolt as well. We talked about how much Photosynthesis helps the team out. Raging Bolt being a huge benefactor of that, with the Assault Vest as well, maybe able to take Lunala and Miraidon's attacks a little bit better. And with 4 moves as well, that Volt Switch being able to repivot out, I think actually might come up in this game. And I'm really excited to see maybe how it comes out. And Ko's team, even though being more standard, I think having small things like that Protect on the Miraidon are going to matter a lot as you play into an explosive teams like James, where a lot of the times they take advantage of the fact that maybe the Miraidon doesn't have Protect and you can attack into it, double into it safely, where now James has to think, okay, maybe I can't double into this turn. Now they have the option to Protect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Protect option is going to be really crucial from Tsukide's side because both players have a ton of offense, but James, I think, is a little more all in on that offense with the Helping Hand that we mentioned, with the Koraidon just like generally a very offensive Pokemon. And Tsukide, if he wants to make use of things like that Ursaluna, is going to have to set up some speed control first, is going to have to maybe have a few turns where something needs to be able to just avoid damage while there's a lot of board positioning happening. So I think having that Protect on the Miraidon, having the ability to either be explosive damage or a safe slot is a really important and useful tool that Tsukide has been using throughout this weekend to very great success. And I think, again, it's going to be super relevant in this match.
Yeah, and I think as well, with a lot of the power of both these restrictions bring is I think the cool thing is, unlike Kyogre and Groudon in previous formats, you don't have to fight for your damage boosting, right? Koraidon will always get to set up the Sun, and Miraidon can always get the Terrain. So I think it's very interesting in that way, where normally you have the dynamic of fighting for that weather, but having them be different in terrain and weather, I think that also feeds into how much damage both of the teams can do as well. Being able to not have your main source of damage and boosting turned off very easily is a very, very nice thing. Especially in a format like this, where with terrestrialization, you want to click, especially on these kinds of teams, offensive ones, where maybe, your Koraidon wants to click Terra Fire, so you can even do more damage with your Flare Blitz or Terra Electric on the Raging Bolt. And not having that option to really turn that off from the other player definitely creates these more explosive board states that you highlighted.
Yeah, absolutely. Koraidon and Miraidon both being able to set up their effects is such a huge deal. I think one thing I want to highlight about that specifically is that there's one Pokemon on James Evans' side that is very happy that Koraidon and Miraidon can mutually coexist with their effects, and that's that Raging Bolt, which can get both the Photosynthesis boost and the Electric Train powering up those Thunderclaps and Thunderbolts and Volt Switches. It can even throw in an Electric Terra to boost to get even more power. So I think that Raging Bolt might wind up being a pretty key player from James Evans' side, just being able to make use of all of these different effects. Now, the big question is whether James Evans is actually able to bring it, or if Tsukide just really plays into the Ursaluna option to try to keep it under control. That Ursaluna, pretty happy to see a Raging Bolt that can just finish it off with a Headlong Rush, doesn't have to worry about Thunderclap if it isn't terrestrialized.
I think the other big thing as well is that it's very happy to see that it's a Raging Bolt with that Dragon Pulse move. James may be saying, okay, I have a lot of offensive pressure. Let me maybe make a bit of a consistent option here in the Dragon Pulse, unlike Draco Meteor, which can miss, unfortunately. So having that consistency option there to just make sure you can do damage does have the trade-off of not having the chance to maybe Oko something like an Ursaluna, which nowadays are EV to maybe live the attacks on the Ursaluna. But a lot of the times it could be weird depending on how they EV their Pokemon.
Yeah, absolutely. Not having that Draco Meteor, probably a really pivotal point of James Evans being able to make it to this point. Like, I think it's very worth noting that there are almost no inaccurate moves on both players' sides. There's like one on each side. There's a Sandseer Storm on the Landorus and a Draco Meteor on the Miraidon. But these players know that you really need to have consistency alongside really powerful strategy and like good predictions and everything. Like I think making sure that you aren't relying on your team too much for getting like no bad luck is really important. But it does mean that James is going to have to find some other ways around this Ursaluna. Maybe one key factor in that might wind up being this Brute Bonnet, depending on how it's trained and where its photosynthesis boosts go. If that's a defense boost that it gets, maybe it has the ability to put out some pressure with that Seed Bomb into the Ursaluna, with redirecting the single target attacks and sort of forcing Earthquakes. Maybe even potentially getting a Spore off if that Electric Train runs out. So there's definitely a few options that James might have for trying to mitigate the Trick Room potential on Tsukide's side.
And I think, as you mentioned, something like the Seed Bomb makes up for maybe the consistency of Dragon Pulse with a Seed Bomb and a Dragon Pulse. Maybe that's enough to get that Ursaluna, which I think, as you mentioned, is going to be such a big threat. Not only can you hit something like the Raging Bolt, but those facades hurt, and they're going to add up as, you know, James's team gets whittled down bit by bit, because while they have a lot of offensive power and prowess, they don't really have the bulk a lot of the time. So they kind of have to sit around and hope they can do the damage before they get knocked out themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely just like a tough ability to try to handle the damage trades perfectly well on these both sides. I think having that Landorus option from James Evans definitely does give opportunities to sort of provide a ton of damage into the Miraidon. If you can play around the Urshifu, then it has a lot of damage into most of the rest of the team. Doesn't have to worry about those ground attacks. So definitely a few options for James, but you really have to make the right call for what Tsukide is going to bring and how to navigate around that.
And with something like the Lunala there on Ko's side as well, I think you have ways around beating the offensiveness of James's team, where you have the innate Shadow Shield on the Lunala, as well as being a normal type, again, highlighting the Ursaluna, being just completely immune to the Astral Barrage, as well as having the option of Wide Guard. You have ways around the offense, as well as ways to just block the offense, and something like Assault Fest and Incineroar is very, very nice, as well as again emphasizing the protect there on the Miraidon. You have ways around it, and even something like Light Screen on Whimsicott, it might not initially seem like a great bring, right? Do I really want to bring Whimsicott into a Sludge Bomb Landorus and a Koraidon? But maybe in Ko's game plan, that Encore could be weaved in, or that Light Screen or Tailwind could be important as well to outspeed a lot of these faster threats like the Shadow Rider and the Koraidon. Maybe that's a part of Ko's game plan. I think there's kind of a deceptiveness here, where Ko actually has a lot more options than maybe meets the eye.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's one of the real strengths about the team that Tsukide is bringing. These Pokemon are really well optimized to work with these restricteds. And so having the Whimsicott as an option to pivot in definitely just adds more risk to everything that James needs to do until James has confirmed which Pokemon Ko has brought. You really don't want to be caught with a Whimsicott switching in at the wrong time and able to Encore a Protect. Even that Raging Bolt, which doesn't have Protect, has to be a bit worried about whether it might get locked into Thunderclap at a time that when it doesn't want to be, or just be locked into an electric move against an Ursaluna where it can't even go for the Dragon Pulse to get some damage out. So I think having that extra pressure and the ability to switch things up is just really valuable in a best of 3 and a really high stakes situation. And so it's really nice to have those options, especially because that Light Screen does reduce the damage output from a lot of the most significant players from James' side of the field.
And, you know, Ko isn't the only one with a supportive grass type on their side. We highlight the Brute Bonnet a little bit, being able to do Seed Bomb, which is a very funny thing, right? Because Brute Bonnet's predecessor, the Amoonguss, you know, is this supportive beast, and you rarely see it running things like Seed Bomb, or at least for maybe a little bit once in a while, but for the most part, opting in for those support moves like the Spore, like the Rage Powder, like the Pollen Puff. But Brute Bonnet's benefit is, I think, it gets the photosynthesis boost, which once again helps against something like the Ursaluna if it's that defense boost. That means it's going to be able to eat a facade a lot better than if it didn't have a defense boost, as well as things like the Seed Bomb for the defensive pressure, but you still get some of the benefits of Amoonguss, where you can run things like the Spore and the Rage Powder, and you also have the benefit of being a Dark type, so you can't get encored by the Whimsicott, but you can get Moonblasted. So there's actually a lot of support that this Brute Bonnet can have as well. And with Covert Cloak as well, Ko is going to have to find a way other than just fake out from Incineroar to get around it. And again, with that defense boost, something like the Choice Band Urshifu might not even be a secure way to get around it because it'd be able to live something like a close combat.
Yeah, there's definitely some options from the Brute Bonnet. It's a bit of an awkward position because of the electric terrain, because of the Flame Orb potentially stopping Ursaluna from being put to sleep, but because it's not like a Moongus. It can do damage, it has Sucker Punch, it has Seed Bomb. There definitely are some abilities for it to be brought. I think, as you mentioned, that weakness to Moonblast is pretty crucial, though. I think, as you've also been calling out, Lunala is just like a really important cornerstone to Tsukide's team, especially in this matchup. It's got the bulk to take attacks from a lot of Pokemon. It's got Wide Guard to be able to reduce Calyrex's output. It is the only thing carrying Trick Room if you want to bring Ursaluna into this matchup. And so, knowing that Lunala is going to be such a key player, it still makes sense for James to be considering that Brute Bonnet, but it's going to be tough to be thinking about how do you use Brute Bonnet when you have to deal with things like the Moonblast putting down a lot of pressure and Brute Bonnet not threatening much damage back into a Lunala if the Terastallization goes into that slot.
And again, I'm not a master of either of these teams, so the gameplays that both these players are going to bring are very exciting to theorize and analyze, because I think, again, this Worlds level gameplay, like they have these set lines maybe that these players have refined over and over again, especially into something like Ko's team. James' team is a bit more unorthodox, so maybe Ko doesn't have as much experience into James's particular team, maybe into Koraidon, Shadow Rider in general, but maybe not into James's variant of it with something oppressive as well, like the Landorus or the Assault Vest Raging Bolt. So having a way around that is really cool, but we are having both of our players here decide that as we get into team select, and we're going to get that game to you soon, but really having both players have those refined lines is my favorite part personally of Worlds. Seeing the prep really come to fruition is just so exciting as you get these explosive games, and being able to bring it to a potential game 3 as well is really cool.
Yeah, I think it's really nice to see these players sort of forced to innovate because they're playing such incredible opponents. And I'm really hoping that this is sort of always my wish when I cast a game, but I'm really hoping it'll go to 3. I think there's a lot of really interesting innovations on either side. We've gotten to highlight like a sliver, the tip of the iceberg of a lot of different adjustments that players can make. And so I'm really interested to see, knowing that Tsukide has a bunch of variants on the standard composition that totally change how it plays, so James can't just rely on his experience. And James has like a totally interesting, innovative team that's fairly different from a lot of the standard approaches. Both players have just a little bit of calibration and adjustment to do as they head into this match relative to maybe what they've practiced and prepared for. And I think that's always the case when you get to these high-level matches. So I'm really interested to see not just what strategies these players start with in Game 1, but really how they change over the course of this set.
Yeah, and I think both players, again, even though it's an offensive team from both sides, I think are really going to have to think about what they want to do. This is their world champion on the line. Both of their previous titles at stake, right? Both previous world champions. They are really locked in. They've done it before. They know what it takes to be a world champion. It's just a question of, can they do it again? And all of that, I'm sure, going through their minds as they select the Pokemon that they're going to be bringing to this game in top 8.
Yeah, absolutely. The pressure is extraordinarily high on both of these players as they try to prove that they're the battered Seniors Division World Champion, and we're going to see a lot of restricteds hitting the field on Ko Tsukide's side, the Miraidon and the Lunala, facing down a different Electric Dragon type in the Raging Bolt, and the tried and true Incineroar from James Evans' side.
Yeah, and this is exactly the offense that we expected there from Ko, but maybe not so much from James. Not leading the Koraidon to get that Sun up means that the Incineroar would have to go for a helping hand to boost up that Raging Bolt. But, as you highlighted as well, that Electric Chain working in the Raging Bolt's favor as well if we do see a Volt Switch locked in here into something like the Lunala. The thing is that James really has to do a good job, I think, of this game at breaking that Shadow Shield before you can start to do damage, whittling down the Pokemon to be in range of something like that Ash Barrage later. But we do see the fake out there go off into the Miraidon, and this Raging Bolt is going to get to move.
First, it's going to have to take a Moongeist Beam for his troubles. With that Assault Vest, it might not be too much damage, but that's still a pretty hefty chunk, about a third of Raging Bolt's hit points. It's going to use that Electric Terrain boosted Volt Switch in retaliation. Mostly, the effect is just to break the Shadow Shield. It's nice to get that 10% chip, but primarily, James is able to get rid of the Shadow Shield and then bring in another option here. It looks like it's going to be that Calyrex Shadow Rider. So putting a lot of pressure on Lunala and Miraidon right away, quite likely to be faster than both of them. But with that Lunala having a wide guard, Calyrex might not be able to put out immediate pressure. So I'm really interested to see what James goes for this next little bit. I think that first turn was really an impeccable execution of a really strong lead from James's side, getting that fake out to delay the pressure from Miraidon, repivoting and breaking the Shadow Shield. But it's definitely hard to find a safe attack at any point with a Calyrex into a Lunala. That's one of the things that Lunala is most known for why it's been used so much in this World Championships.
Yeah, absolutely. And being safe, I think, is definitely what James really has to decide carefully here as the clock ticks down. If you do go for something like a Helping Hand Astral Barrage, it could all just be for naught if Ko goes for a wide guard, as we see the Helping Hand play off into the Calyrex there. Astral Barrage going to be the move of choice, though. No wide guard from Ko, and that is an explosive turn. Not able to pick up the Miraidon, though, but with the Focus Sash on the Calyrex Shadow Rider on James's end means it's going to be able to live any attack from Ko's side there on the Miraidon.
Volt Switch coming out into that Incineroar, but it's too little too late, taking that Life Orb damage that doesn't quite KO the Miraidon. So still having the Miraidon in is huge from Ko, but that's so incredible. I cannot believe James just went all in on the Astral Barrage, knowing there was the risk of that wide guard and a powerful attack from the Miraidon, but James got that read correct, and that is devastating for Ko's side. Ko has lost an entire restricted and 99% of the health on the other one just from one incredible read from James's side.
Yeah, and I think that puts James in an amazing position for this game one. Having your Shadow Rider be swapped in and not take any damage, preserving that Focus Sash instead of having to manually switch out the Raging Bolt, I think it's just a benefit of having Volt Switch here on James's side and breaking the Shadow Shield as well. Otherwise, maybe, the Lunala gets to live that turn. But Ursaluna here is going to get to come in and be immune to those Astral Barrages from Ko's side, and Ko is still deciding on what gets to come in on that other slot, right? It's either the Miraidon that is in range of Astral Barrage or potentially another Pokemon that I'm not sure can eat a +1 Astral Barrage either. And with Helping Hand on Incineroar here as well, you're even threatening a Psychic into something like the Ursaluna. And this is looking more and more dangerous for Ko as the game goes on.
Yeah, we were just talking before the match about how much of a cornerstone Pokemon Lunala is for Ko's team in this matchup, and having lost it right away, I think you can immediately see Ko needs to just take a minute to try to figure out if there's a salvageable game plan for this match. We are going to see an Incineroar hitting the field again, a really good choice into this Calyrex, putting a lot of pressure out on the opposing side of the field. But it's tough seeing these two really powerful, slow Pokemon on Ko Tsukude's side, knowing that they will not get this Trick Room at any point in this game. The Lunala is down for the count after only having attacked once.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Incineroar being a great choice here, swapping in. If you are looking for a chance to deal of Shadow Rider, you really want to, have a resist to an attack to have a chance. And you, of course, can, with Incineroar being the Pokemon on the field here, you can go for a fake out into the opposing Incineroar. James, though, again, has the option of that Helping Hand. There's so many options that James just has here that I think puts Ko in a really awkward spot. And we are just going to see a Protect, though, from the Calyrex to block a potential dark move from Ko's Incineroar.
We're going to see a Protect on both sides, it looks like. That Ursaluna trying to keep itself safe from anything like a Helping Hand Psychic. Incineroar is going to go for a U-turn. I think that was from Ko's side into that protecting Calyrex Shadow Rider. So a nice Protect from the Calyrex, as a knockoff is going to get rid of that Assault Vest on Incineroar's side of the field. Definitely nice for James to be able to just remove that item, make sure that these Astral Barrages are going to do a little more damage. But very crucially, Ko might have been expecting a switch out from that Calyrex Shadow Rider with all the pressure from the Incineroar, because now with that Calyrex Shadow Rider having stayed on the field, it has Encore pressure into that Ursaluna, which is now locked into, or has just used Protect, and could be potentially locked into it. So a ton of momentum that James gets just from burning that one turn, but keeping Calyrex Shadow Rider on the field.
Yeah, and while you can go for an encore into the Ursaluna, you do have to worry about an attack from Ko's Incineroar to potentially bring this Calyrex down to its Focus Sash. But we are just going to see a helping hand here from James, boosting up the damage of the Shadow Rider even more, and at +1 is trying to go for attack, but the Ursaluna gets a double protect there, preventing the Shadow Rider from doing any damage at all, and that means Ko's Incineroar here is going to get off scot-free and is going to be able to go for a knockoff, bringing the Calyrex down to 1 HP, knocking off that Focus Sash, and Ursaluna gets to live another turn.
Just a wonderfully timed double protect from Ko Tsukide. I think it's easy to say that there was some luck there, and there totally was, but Ko knowing exactly when to go for that, being on the back foot, having lost a prediction earlier, knowing that this could just be devastating to get that one more turn for the Incineroar to get a knockoff out. And I think as soon as that Calyrex is down, this Miraidon that Ko has sitting in the back is going to be able to have time to maybe get off one more attack, which could be pretty significant. So any bit of damage that Ko can get onto the Calyrex is super impactful. So being able to get that read right and get that double protect right as well definitely puts Ko a little bit closer to being just clawing slowly back into this game here.
I think if Ko is looking for a way back into the game, this absolutely makes a lot of sense. You want to preserve something like the Ursaluna maybe against the Raging Bolt, but instead of preserving, we're going to see no swaps as the Calyrex on James's end goes for Protect, not wanting to get knocked off there, revealing that Ko's Incineroar is also faster than James's, as the Incineroar here on James's side goes for the knockoff. Knocking off that Flame Orb. It's a little too late, though. The Ursaluna is burned and is going to go for a Facade, though, into James's Incineroar and taking a little bit of damage from that Rocky Helmet. That's something else that's important here as well. Maybe you didn't get the Helping Hand Psychic off into the Ursaluna, but every turn that Ko goes for Protect or goes for an attack into something like the Rocky Helmet Incineroar, you have to take chip damage, and that damage is starting to add up as we see the Ursaluna already a little under half HP as James swaps in the Landorus here to finish off both of the targets here with a super effective Earth Power into the Incineroar, or definitely can do enough into this Ursaluna, being at under half HP, as I mentioned before.
I imagine Ko's heart is sinking a little seeing that Landorus. It's just the perfect time for James to be able to have that Incineroar be knocked out, to be able to get a nice safe switch in there. The Earth Power, as you mentioned, threatening a KO into either slot, and that Miraidon in the back, sure, it could come in and Draco Meteor to get rid of the Landorus, but it really doesn't have many more attacks before it's going to faint to that Life Orb. And so James bringing just the perfect Pokemon for this situation, I believe, and managing to get it out in a nice position so that he's able to put out a lot of pressure this turn. We are going to see the Calyrex swap out, though, not going for a double KO this turn from James' side, instead bringing that Raging Bolt back onto the field.
I think not even risking it, as well as Ko goes for a Terastallization here, just to make sure you could potentially live as the bug comes out here on the Incineroar to live that Earth Power if it goes off into that slot. I think preserving the Shadow Rider makes a lot of sense, just so you can guarantee be faster than the Miraidon later, as that Ursaluna goes for Protect, though. Earth Power trying to go off into it, but is going to attack once again into that Protect from Ko's Ursaluna, and the Incineroar is going to get to go for a U-turn here. Bug boosted as well off that Terastallization, does a tiny bit to the Raging Bolt, but more importantly is going to be able to pivot back into this Miraidon and gets the fire off an attack, considering the Shadow Rider isn't on the field.
Yeah, really nice to be able to see James pivoting in the Raging Bolt, saving the Calyrex Shadow Rider. Miraidon is going to hit the field again, set up that Electric Terrain, but let's just take a glance at that after this burn tick happens on the Ursaluna. The HP number on this Miraidon, oh wow, it does not have a lot of hit points left. And I think, especially with the Raging Bolt just having access to Thunderclap, it's going to be really tough for Ko to be able to find the space for it to even get off one attack. So James definitely still in the driver's seat here, but I like to see Ko trying to pull out all the stops, going for the Terastallization with Bug. Maybe there's something that Ko's going to be able to do to try to gain just a little bit more positioning and try to move this a little bit closer.
Thunderclap, though, is going to be the move of choice, stopping the Miraidon before it even gets to attack with that priority. That means the Miraidon's down, and Earth Power going to be the next move from the Landorus, able to knock out that Ursaluna on Ko's side, and Incineroar being the last Pokemon, even with that Bug Terastallization, I don't think has a way over James's 3 Pokemon that are still left on his side, and that means James is going to be taking game 1.
Yeah, really well played from James's side. I really loved seeing everything Ko was doing to make sure that it wasn't too easy for James to win this match. There was definitely an opportunity there if the Thunderclap hadn't gone into that slot to be able to really turn things around. And I like Ko just trying to go for a combination of trying to get good predictions, trying to use terrestrialization to try to bring this a little bit closer. But definitely the question on Ko's mind now, I think taking the full time less to decide what to do for this game and more to think about what the plan is for game 2. I think there's just a huge question about how to manage that Calyrex Shadow Rider.
Yeah, and I think Mao taking that extra time, knowing that this game 1 is over, just using that extra bit of team decision time that you maybe don't get in team preview, using as much of it as possible to figure out a better game plan maybe. And I think something you could definitely analyze it after this post game 1 is that you want to maybe preserve your Lunala a little bit better. We saw it go down so quickly at this game 1, and Ko's game plan kind of fell apart from there. I think maybe not expecting that James would take such a risk as the Sludge Bomb and Thunderbolt here finish off Ko's Incineroar and take game 1 guaranteed here, and that's going to be for James's favor. And again, I'm really excited to see maybe how Ko is going to adapt in this game. If we maybe see a terrestrialization on the Lunala in an attempt to preserve it more, or maybe playing into the Trick Room to get the Ursaluna to actually finally get off an attack instead of going for double protects and things like that. I feel like that game, a lot of the times, Ko's Pokemon didn't really get to do anything. It was more of switching or repositioning or just protecting, and really didn't get a chance to click an offensive button at all, it felt like.
Yeah, absolutely. It felt like that game was close to decided just as soon as James went for that all-in helping hand Astral Barrage play. I think Ko did a good job of making sure that it wasn't completely decided and trying to cling to that little margin, but definitely a big signal to Ko to try to come up with a different plan with this Lunala. I like what you mentioned about the terrestrialization. I think that's a pretty clear note to take out of this match, is just if Lunala is not so weak to the Astral Barrage, then it can still survive. It can fire back a Moongeist Beam, it can set up Trick Room, give a lot more options for Ko's side of the field. But I think some of the other options that Ko has that you'd normally look to are actually a bit scary. There's this one move that James never clicked in the first game, but that I think played a huge role in the match, which is Encore on the Calyrex Shadow Rider. Normally, Lunala can threaten this wide guard to block Astral Barrage, but there's so much risk in clicking that in front of a Calyrex that has Encore, because sure, you can block an Astral Barrage once, but then you're in all this danger of being Encored into the wide guard. You could even be Encored the turn you click wide guard. Like, there's so much risk that James was then able to sort of capitalize on, not by directly clicking Encore, but just by saying, all right, you have to think about all of this complex stuff. I'm just going to go for damage, and right away, just out of the gate, forcing Ko to really think about how to safely manage a lot of damage output that, when a lot of the defensive plays that you would normally go for are easy to punish.
But we are going to be hopping into game 2 here of James Evans versus Ko Tsukide. We have our leads from both of our trainers. Ko leading off with the Miraidon and Lunala again, and James Evans with the Raging Bolt and Incineroar.
So the same lead from both sides. Definitely it seemed like James was in a nice spot with this last round. Being able to just get that fake out off and a nice safe volt switch, it seems like that's pretty likely what James would be going for the next time too, but maybe Ko has a few tricks up his sleeve to deviate from this line. I think if the Lunala is able to set up Trick Room right away, and then the Ursaluna comes in and has the Flame Orb activated, there's definitely some options that Ko could go for to maybe punish some of the safer plays that James was making in the last round. So we'll have to see if this just turns out in the same way, or if there's a few variants that these players throw in as they try to figure out how to get the most out of this lead matchup.
And we actually see James maybe clicking a different move here, hovering over the knockoff instead of the fake out. I think is a great adjustment here from James. As we see the terrestrialization go off into the Raging Bolt, opting into that Terra Electric, boosting up the damage, Terrain boosted, Terra Electric boosted, same type of attack bonus boosted, electric move from this Raging Bolt, but a Protect, though, from the Miraidon is going to be the move choice, and a Moonblast from Ko this time instead of a Moongeist Beam. The Volt switch there is going to do even more damage through the Shadow Shield. Not that much more, but is going to be able to switch out, more notably, that you're not going to be taking super effective Moonblast damage there. And the next choice James has to decide is what Pokemon I'm going to switch in. It seems to be that Calyrex Shadow Rider, And as it comes in, you're once again threatening a big Astral Barrage in helping hand with the Shadow Shield broken there on the Lunala.
So a ton of little really interesting technicalities with that last turn. On paper, it just played out more or less exactly the same, except James has burned a Terrestrialization and done like 2% more to the Lunala. But I thought there were a lot of really interesting factors there. As you mentioned, trying to reduce the Moonblast damage. There were a bunch of other things that I think James was doing to try to reduce the risk of then not needing to go for the fake out, which we'll totally have to break down after this match, because I think there was a ton of interesting stuff happening. But right now, the key question on both players' minds is definitely, is there an Astral Barrage coming out from this Calyrex Shadow Rider? Is there maybe even just an Encore to trap that Miraidon into a Protect, since it went for Protect, instead of flinching off of a fake out? We are going to see that Terrestrialization you mentioned last game, Tyson. Just that ability to make sure you don't have to rely on Wide Guard to avoid this Astral Barrage getting a KO.
But we do see an Encore, no Wide Guard from Ko's Lunala. That means Miraidon is going to be Encored into Protect. It actually gets the double there, and Ko is going to be able to block an attack from Incineroar as it goes for the knockoff. No damage into this Miraidon at all, but this Terrestrialization leads me to believe that maybe there's an attack there, but actually it's a Trick Room from the Lunala.
Okay, so super interesting there. The Miraidon being able to keep its life orb, definitely a really nice plus for Ko. I think there's a bit of a question, though, because this Miraidon now has a really low chance of getting a triple Protect. And pivoting in the Ursaluna, which is what you'd normally most want to do, is super risky right now, because that Incineroar could just knock off the Flame Orb and prevent the Guts boost from Ursaluna before that's able to activate. So it's awesome for Ko to be able to set up Trick Room. That's super important for this match. But figuring out how to pivot things in safely and actually make use of that Trick Room is something that James has been trying really carefully this game to make really difficult, just continually going for the knockoff into that Miraidon slot to try to block an Ursaluna switch in.
And we do see the Miraidon swap for Ko there into a different Pokemon, which is going to be the Incineroar. A lot better of a target than the Ursaluna, really preserving that Flame Orb, recognizing how much that Guts boost does for it. The knockoff there, though, going to knock off the Assault Vest on Ko's Incineroar, meaning it's going to take just a little bit more from a potential Shadow Rider attack. Moongeist being the option for the Lunala, bringing down James's Calyrex down to its Focus Sash, but it is going to get to go for an attack or a move this turn, and the Astral Barrage is going to be the move of choice, attacking into a resistant Incineroar and a neutral Lunala. And Lunala, again, now Terrestrialized, not going to get immediately knocked out from it, more importantly.
Yeah, I think that Ko very happy to see Lunala actually surviving a Astral Barrage, being sort of still comfortably able to go for another attack, not really threatened by anything that James can do this particular turn. I do like seeing James go for that Astral Barrage still. I think there's a temptation from Ko's side to maybe try to be cautious about what you switch in, but if that Miraidon had sort of stayed in the field, that Astral Barrage would have done a ton of damage, and I think just getting the chip onto these two Pokemon is really useful for James as he tries to find a path through weathering this Trick Room. But I think there's definitely an open question now for what James will pivot in to try to make use of Trick Room. There's still 3 more turns of Trick Room left, and Ko is getting in a progressively better position to try to pivot in this Ursaluna at some point before Trick Room expires.
Yeah, and I think with Fake Out on the field here, you could have just gone for a Fake Out, but instead is going to go for a U-turn there into the Landorus, which was the Incineroar before, repivoting into that potential Ursaluna that you mentioned, and being able to get under Trick Room with a little bit of turns left is absolutely amazing here. You're going to be able to get off that Flame Orb activation with no knockoff on the field, as Moongeist doesn't finish off the Calyrex Shadow Rider and instead does a little bit of damage to the Landorus. Astral Barrage, though, going to be completely immune against the Ursaluna and able to finish off the Lunala, though. I think that boost that it's going to get here is going to be a little too late, as we see the Incineroar potentially come back in, or even the Miraidon, just to do a little bit more. Again, as you mentioned, this Ursaluna here is under Trick Room, and you're just able to kind of Facade Slot, or just go for headlong rushes into maybe the Shadow Rider to call a Raging Bolt or an Incineroar swap.
Yeah, Ko has finally gotten this Ursaluna into prime position to be able to take some KOs. It did cost Ko's Lunala, though, so there's no more Trick Room for the rest of the game, and there's not many more turns of this Trick Room either. We're going to see Ko just send out that Miraidon. I think we've previously established it is slower than the Calyrex Shadow Rider, for sure, and so it's got a nice safe Volt Switch into that Calyrex Shadow Rider slot. as the Ursaluna is probably able to threaten a KO into the Landorus. So there's definitely plenty of offense that Ko has now, having lost Lunala but still have a couple of turns of Trick Room. But there really are only a couple turns of Trick Room left, and so I'm really interested to see if James is able to weather this next turn and one more, then the momentum might switch back a little bit. If James is able to preserve the right Pokemon to still do damage into that Ursaluna and is still able to handle that Miraidon later.
And I want to really highlight how important it was to get that Moongeist Beam into Landorus as it goes for Protect here. The next move of choice, though, is going to be the Facade into that Landorus, which would finish it off, but actually targets down into the Kyrex and an Electro Drift into the Kyrex Shadow. A great double up there from Ko, recognizing that if the Incineroar or the the Raging Bolt come in, that the Ursaluna would be able to finish it off, and just making sure that slot is gone regardless, I think is great heads-up play from Ko. And again, I want to mention before that the Moongeist Beam going into the Landorus is really, really important, because if James had a full HP Landorus and maybe switched it into an Incineroar, you had a chance to potentially live a Facade maybe, and you could go for Earth Power into Miraidon, but not having that choice and having the Landorus play at this low amount of HP really puts Ko in the driver's seat for these last turns in Trick Room.
Yeah, absolutely. This Landorus now no longer really able to survive any attack from the other side of the field unless there's a ton of Intimidate support. Definitely makes it a lot harder for James to make it through this Trick Room. There is just the one turn left, though, and I really like that James sort of let the Calyrex faint and didn't pivot anything else in. Ko was ready for that Raging Bolt to hit the field or that Incineroar, and so James, I think, making a crucial call to sort of survive a really dangerous turn last turn, still having a couple of Pokemon left, and forcing a Protect from this Ursaluna on the last turn of Trick Room because of that Fake Out pressure.
Yeah, a Fake Out on Earth Power could spell a lot of damage for either Pokemon on Ko's side, so going for that double Protect, even if it means burning through that last turn of Trick Room, is definitely worth it in Ko's favor, or even a Sandsear Storm as we see James pick that move instead. And as this Trick Room turn goes up, I think Ko's actually looking decently fine with a nearly full HP Ursaluna and a Miraidon that doesn't have to worry about a Calyrex Shadow Rider to outspeed it and can go for one of those Life Orb boosted attacks. And that's just one of the benefits that we see here of that Protect on the Miraidon. Having the flexibility of going for either a Draco Meteor or an electric move into the Incineroar, or an electric move, into the Incineroar is great flexibility there from Ko's Miraidon.
Yeah, the Miraidon is definitely in the driver's seat now. It's weathered the Trick Room, and I think is still in nice prime position to make use of it now being faster, now that the Calyrex Shadow Rider is gone. I think there's definitely still one question that's got to be on both players' minds about whether that Draco Meteor will connect if it goes into the Landorus slot. There's definitely a chance for James to just win on the spot almost if that misses. But there's a ton that James is going to have to do if he wants to play to anything better than that 10%. And we are going to see the Raging Bolt swapping in, trying to take a Draco Meteor and buy just a little bit of time for this key player, the Landorus, to do more damage later.
And it is going to hang on thanks to that Assault Vest. Miraidon going to lose a little bit of HP off that Life Orb. Knockoff, though, into the Ursaluna, not able to bring it to about 50%. Ursaluna is going to get off an attack, and it's the Headlong Rush, doubling into that slot. Headlong rushing a Landorus slot, recognizing that it was most likely going to swap out, or if it got knocked out from the Draco Meteor, being able to fire off that into the Incineroar. Again, a very heads-up play from Ko, just taking KO after KO, and James is now down to his last two Pokemon.
Yeah, I think that's a really clever Headlong Rush targeting. If Miraidon has to go down too many times from different special attack drops from going for Draco Meteor, then it suddenly loses the ability to threaten the KO on Landorus, so getting rid of that Raging Bolt as soon as possible is pretty crucial for Ko to be able to do. As it stands now, with this Landorus so low, I think it's probably likely that this Miraidon's still able to threaten that Draco Meteor KO, unless this Landorus has a little bit of bulk there, and if it's able to get that Draco Meteor KO, and if it connects, then things are still looking pretty tough for James Evans.
I mean, you said it. I didn't want to say it. If the Draco Meteor connects, that's the big question this turn. But actually, Ko's going to preserve the Miraidon and swap it out here in favor of that Incineroar that we knew was in the back with that Assault Vest. Maybe poising a potentially fake out this next turn to just guarantee that you are able to get the knockout next turn with the Ursaluna. you could go for a fake out and headlong rush next turn, and that would make a lot of sense. The Sandsear Storm, though going to be the move of choice from James, is not going to hit the Incineroar, and a huge miss. Maybe was able to hang on with the Assault Vest, but not too sure.
Yeah, definitely tough for James to get a miss there. You really want everything you can to go your way. I think one interesting factor, it might potentially be useful for James to have Miraidon not immediately hitting the field again, because now for a little bit, this Landorus is the fastest thing on the field and has an opportunity to try to set up a Sandsear Storm later, although it's just going to protect this turn, stay safe from any fake out pressure on the other side of the field, which is in fact going to go into that slot.
And this makes a lot of sense, making sure you don't get damaged before you get to attack with your Ursaluna as that Headlong Rush comes off into the Incineroar. Able to just get the one-hit knockout is absolutely amazing for Ko. And with Miraidon in the back, as well as 2 damagers on the field as well, even Incineroar, I think, is enough to deal with the Landorus left on the field.
Yeah, I think at this point, there is one win condition James has, which is a missed Draco Meteor, and other than that, things are looking pretty tough, and James has got to just be thinking about that game 3. So some really nice heads-up play from Ko here to be able to get down to that 90% win condition. I think just an excellently executed Lunala Trick Room into Ursaluna sweep game plan here.
But yeah, I want to talk about it. Oh, Landorus misses the Sandsear Storm, though. Doesn't even get the opportunity to attack into that Miraidon. With how low HP this Landorus is, the Ursaluna is going to be able to finish it off. If James did get the Sandsear Storm knockout on both those Pokemon, though, the Miraidon comes in. Like you said, the Draco Meteor misses, then an Earth Power can follow up and get the knockout, and it could be immediately in James's favor. A very intense last few turns there for sure.
Yeah, I think one really interesting piece, it's hard to say, like figure out the exact probabilities of endgames, just like a nice little fact there. Ko was trying to play towards a Draco Meteor hit, but like sort of delaying that Draco Meteor hit towards the end gave a couple of extra chances to not even have to roll those dice. Like if the Sandsear Storm misses at any point, you suddenly got a chance to win the game without needing to rely on that. I think those really subtle little optimizations there, not going for a Draco Meteor earlier with Miraidon when the damage rolls were unclear, sort of trying to keep it around until the very end, was really nice. And I think is one of the reasons why these players are as far as they are. Even when you have a 90% win condition, these players say, no, 90% is not good enough. I have to try to get as close as possible to a fully guaranteed win condition here.
I mean, exactly, yeah. If you told me I have either, it's not the exact odds, obviously, if you compound all of the odds together, but, like, would you rather click Hydro Pump or Draco Meteor, right? Like, those small bits of percentages matter, and especially in the World Championships, doing anything you can to optimize your odds for winning the game really are going to matter, especially in Ko's case where, you know, they're fighting for this game 2 to make it to bring it to a game 3, and now James has to reconsider his entire game plan to maybe decide that, okay, wait, that was actually really close. Ko, with the Terrestrialization on the Lunala, brought that to a game 3. Now what do I do? Where do I adapt?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see if James sticks with the same Pokemon. It seemed like he had a really strong game plan for that last game, and things just didn't work out quite right, but that Ursaluna got really scary quite quickly. I guess I will say James was doing a really good job of controlling the slot where the Ursaluna came in for quite a while with those knockoffs, and it was just the one time that James wasn't able to get the knockoff into that slot that things really began to snowball and get out of hand. If you don't have a Flame Orb on that Ursaluna, then its Facade is not only not Guts boosted, but it's 70 base power instead of 140, and that gives so much more wiggle room for the Landorus. So we'll have to see if James sticks with the same Pokemon or not. He does, but actually Ko is going to be switching it up with an Ursaluna hitting the field right away, saying, I know you're going to try to knock off my Flame Orb. I'm just going to lead so that I have the option to go for Protect and get that Flame Orb right away.
And I think this is really smart because if you are able to position yourself in a way, you know that James doesn't have the Cataracts Shadow Rider on lead, being able to reposition yourself and, like you said, go for Protect, guarantee get the Flame Orb, and then say, okay, I set you up, now you can go in the back and I can worry about you later, maybe set up a Trick Room and get you back in again, and doing that safely is very, very favorable for Ko here, even if it looks like initially you're facing down an Intimidate from the Incineroar. And you even have the option now without the Flame Orb, because both these targets are weak. If you want to fish for a little bit of chip damage, you can go for a Headlong Rush into either of these targets.
Yeah, I really like this lead from Ko. It looks super unintuitive, leading your Trick Room Sweeper without any way to set up Trick Room, leaving all your restricteds in the back. But it's sort of forcing a lot of defensive play from James here, sort of pivoting immediately that Raging Bolt into the ground Immune Landorus Incarnate, even though that Ursaluna's just going for the nice safe protect, really doesn't want to have that Flame Orb knocked off. We're going to see a Fake Out go into the other Incineroar slot, so pretty much a dead turn here, but that's such a crucial effect for Ko to get off right away. The last game, I think really the early turns revolved around whether and how that Ursaluna would get that up safely, and now Ko has sort of like checked box number 1 along the Trick Room win condition path here.
The difference between this game and last, though, is that the Incineroar hasn't gotten a chance to knock off Ko's Incineroar's Assault Vest, which means it has a better chance at taking one of these Sandseer Storms or Earth Powers from James's Landorus. And even into the Ursaluna, if you do decide to go for a Sandseer Storm, is going to do a decent amount of damage. Knockoff, though, even if it can't remove the burn that is already on the Ursaluna, the knockoff will still be double base power because of the Flame Orb being on the Ursaluna. But actually is going to swap out there for Ko, as we talked about preserving it for the Lunala. But with no Electric Seed there, Earth Power is going to break the Shadow Shield. And if this is a knockoff follow-up, that could be a lot of damage into the Ursaluna. But U-turn from Ko's Incineroar, critical hit for a little bit more damage, is going to be able to repivot into what they please. And I would believe this to be maybe the Miraidon to take a physical attack from this Incineroar a little bit better, and you can Volt Switch next turn as well as a Trick Room. And Ko's kind of found this perfect position now where you have the same position from game 1, but the Ursaluna is set up in the back, and I think this positioning from Ko is amazing.
Being able to get that Miraidon in right then was so crucial. I think this Lunala super dodged a bullet here from the potential knockoff there. But it is just going to be a parting shot, so Lunala can't do as much damage, but I think it's pretty happy not being able to do so much damage. It's really here to set Trick Room and let that Ursaluna that's already in the back, pre-burned and everything, to be able to sort of sweep through the rest of this game. And we're going to have to see. James has to make a really crucial decision here about what Pokemon to pull out, because anything that James brings out here is going to have to try to stop a Trick Room, or else James is going to have to make it through a really tough win condition that Ko's been setting up here.
And I think the tough win condition is an understatement. We saw how quickly it was able to kind of work through James's Pokemon, and the Calyrex comes in here as an attempt to maybe damage down some of Ko's Pokemon, forcing a Wide Guard instead of a Trick Room here. But Ko still has, again, that explosive option of a Draco Meteor into the Landorus, or even a Volt Switch into the Calyrex to bring it down to its Focus Sash. The benefit that Lunala has against the Calyrex is Moongeist Beam is 4 times super effective if James does not go for a Terrestrialization. So the -1 from Parting Shot doesn't really matter as much if you are attacking into the Calyrex.
Yeah, I think the Lunala being able to survive here is super crucial. I would very much expect to see a Terrestrialization, as you've been discussing before. I think James has some really interesting choices to make here. Sort of knowing that you don't have a consistent way to stop the Trick Room, we're actually going to see James just pivoting out immediately into Raging Bolt, trying to maybe take advantage of a turn or two when the Trick Room is set up. But actually, Lunala's going to delay that Trick Room option. It's just going for a Wide Guard right now, keeping the Miraidon safe. Astral Barrage coming out, hitting into 2 now protected Pokemon. And the question is, what's Miraidon going to go for? It has a free opportunity to Draco Meteor or Electro Drift either slot.
And yet another benefit of the Loifor being able to pick and choose your moves at will is going to choose the Volt Switch for this time, swapping out, bringing Calyrex down to essentially its Focus Sash there at the 4 HP. Miraidon is going to swap out there for Ko, but with no Trick Room, Ursaluna isn't really a safe swap into here. Actually, deceptively, maybe it is, even without the Trick Room. You are immune to Astral Barrage and to 3 of Raging Bolt's moves, and Dragon Pulse and Psychic, I'm not too sure it would be able to get a knockout on the Ursaluna with how bulky it is. And, with Lunala's Terrestrialization as well, you could go for a Trick Room and just straight up attack on the Ursaluna. But Ko maybe taking a little bit more time here, not fully thinking through what they want to bring in, either the Incineroar or the Ursaluna. And yeah, it is going to be that setup Ursaluna.
So I think it makes sense to bring in the Ursaluna now, seeing that Raging Bolt hit the field. But as you mentioned, there's definitely that question, would a Psychic plus Dragon Pulse finish off the Ursaluna? I think Lunala is in a bit of a weird spot here. It successfully blocked the Astral Barrage last turn, but it does have to worry just a little bit about that Encore lock into Wide Guard. And so I think just trying to bring out the Ursaluna and put pressure immediately so that there's not an easy way to Encore lock the Lunala is a nice play from Ko's side. But there's definitely a lot of ways that things could go wrong for kind of either side here. There's a ton of potential damage from James's side. And that Ursaluna is, of course, threatening a ton of ground-type damage, but it's definitely going to move last. There's no Trick Room on the field here now, and that's going to make things just a whole lot more complicated than maybe we were expecting things to be for Ursaluna, having already set up the Flame Orb.
But we do see that final Terastallization here for Ko in this game 3. Or, excuse me, for James, is going to be the Raging Bolt into the Terra Electric. Was kind of expecting the Lunala there to Terastallize as well in the face of his Astral Barrage, but actually isn't. With no Terastallization and no Wide Guard, is going to be able to knock out this Lunala without the Shadow Shield, and that's going to bring Ursaluna to +1. And with this Terra Electric, though, on the Raging Bolt, going for Volt Switch into the Ursaluna makes it, being a ground type is going to be immune to it. So the Raging Bolt is going to have to stay in against Ko's Ursaluna as the Facade goes into the Raging Bolt slot and a critical hit just to guarantee the knockout there on the Raging Bolt. That's a whole Pokemon and Terastallization gone for James.
Ursaluna really just saying, I don't need Trick Room, I can just do all my damage right now, staying safe from that really terrifying Terra Electric attack from the Raging Bolt. I'm curious to know what James might have been expecting there, probably anticipating a Lunala Terastallization and wanting to really guarantee a KO on that Lunala, preventing that Trick Room. But instead, James losing that Raging Bolt I think is a pretty significant hit, especially because the Terastallization is gone. At the same time, now that this Ursaluna is officially sentenced to never being in Trick Room this game, I think it opens up a couple of opportunities for James to think through some alternative win conditions in this game.
Absolutely. I think as well, the fact that Ko has Terastallization as well, that Incineroar with that bug, we saw how impactful it was, or how impactful it could have been even through James's team. I think being resistant to the ground type moves could be very impactful against fighting a Landorus in the back for James here, but the Miraidon is going to swap in for Ko, and James really has to decide here what he wants to lock into. We see hovering the Encore. If you do lock the Ursaluna into Facade, then you kind of have a guaranteed way around it. Being a ghost type, you are immune to the Facades, but that means the Miraidon gets to go for a potential attack in out of these slots, and it's really going to come down to these final turns to see where James can take this game.
Yeah, absolutely. We are seeing that Encore definitely, James is almost locked into that. So it looks like James is planning on just keeping the Calyrex Shadow Rider safe. A Protect is going to come out again from the Ursaluna, though. Or actually just the first time, pardon. Preventing that Encore as the Fake Out goes into the Miraidon slot. Miraidon really carefully not protecting so that it can't be Encored. And then that Encore lock, sure, it doesn't happen this turn, but the Ursaluna is still under a little bit of pressure here. It avoids being stuck into Facade, but it could still be locked into that Protect now.
And with one turn of Electric Terrain, Ko really has to decide if keeping that Electric Terrain around is important or not. The Calyrex being at such low HP means any attack is going to finish it off from this range, and if you're Ko, you really have to decide how you're getting rid of this Shadow Rider, because if you don't, it's going to be able to do so much damage to not only your Miraidon, but even with Psychic into your Ursaluna as well. James still has a way in this game as well with the full HP Incineroar, and with access to things like Knockoff and Helping Hand, James is still very much in the driver's seat, I feel like, and Ko has to kind of fight their way through these final turns of the game to maybe get some damage back in their favor. But we do see a swap from Miraidon there into the Incineroar, repositioning a Fake Out potentially there, to try to reposition a way where you can get some damage with your Ursaluna.
Yeah, so the Incineroar hitting the field, always a safe switch in when there's a Calyrex on the other side. Calyrex just going for Protect, pretty concerned about damage. And Knockoff firing off, just starting to chip away at that Ursaluna. Ursaluna does not get the targeting right this turn, which is pretty crucial. Calyrex Shadow Rider has just established itself as such a threat that Ko's really tunnel vision on it, wants to get rid of that as soon as possible. And not being able to this turn means that there's still a ton of pressure from this Calyrex Shadow Rider. It could switch out and still be a threat for the Miraidon in the back later on in the game. I do like that Incineroar getting positioned in so safely here, though. It's now got enough momentum to go for a nice safe knockoff or try to U-turn safely to get the Miraidon back into play with the Electric Terrain. I think there's a ton of options that are slowly opening up with bringing that Incineroar back onto the field. But with that, Ursaluna's hit points just slowly whittling away from the burn chip, from the knockoffs and everything, I think Ko's really got a timer on being able to close out this game. There's just the damage sort of slowly adding up here on that side of the field.
And I think actually not knocking out the Incineroar there is huge, because that means James would have gotten a free swap into Landorus and threatened the Incineroar, but keeping it in and forcing a Psychic to target down into Ursaluna, knocking it out, means that this Incineroar potentially could go for a move into the Calyrex and end its reign of terror once and for all, as, yeah, it's the U-turn to reposition in, reset the option for Fake Out, and get Miraidon in, but being faster with Ko's Incineroar means that James gets to go for an attack of his own into this Miraidon. If that's a knockoff, that's a huge loss of power after the Life Orb gets knocked off. But Ko does get to reset the train here with the Hadron Engine.
So Electric Train resets, we'll have to see. It's not a knockoff, so not damage, not removing the Life Orb, but reducing that special attack on the Miraidon, maybe preventing it from threatening quite as much damage. I would anticipate that it's still threatening a whole lot of damage with Hadron Engine active and everything, to still potentially be able to close out on either of these Pokemon. Depends a little bit on how the Landorus is trained. But crucially, this Incineroar is setting up the Fake Out pressure again. Although, now both sides, having just pivoted out their Incineroar, will be able to threaten that Fake Out, so they can sort of effectively neutralize each other for this turn.
And the benefit that Ko has as well is that you know your Incineroar is faster than James's, based off that previous speed interaction. So being able to go for a Fake Out into James' Incineroar means you can just go for a Draco Meteor into the Landorus if James lets you. You do have the option of Protect, though, to block against that. But of course, that means, you know, Ko could target down into the Incineroar, and that could be disastrous as well. Not knocking off the Life Orb means it's still going to have to take a little bit of recoil from that Life Orb, but, you know, in combination with a knockoff or a ground move here from the Landorus, that could be enough to knock it out. So this game is still very much in both trainers' favor, and it could be either of theirs.
We're actually seeing the Miraidon going for a Protect, just trying to keep itself safe, as the Incineroar does not go. There's no Fake Outs, just protects for now. The Incineroars are going to lock in what they're going to go for next. Both sides being a little bit concerned. There's one Fake Out into that Landorus, just preventing any too much damage from coming out, and a knockoff in return into that Miraidon. So just an alternative way for Ko to burn through this almost forced Protect from the Landorus side without needing to worry about taking like some Rocky Helmet chip if you had faked out into that Incineroar and then tried to just immediately go for the Draco Meteor into the Landorus. So I think definitely playing out pretty favorably for Ko's side. Now there's a clearer Draco Meteor, not as easily blocked by Protect, into that Landorus. As we see a Terastallization coming out from one of the sides here, it's going to be that Incineroar going into that tried and true bug type, making sure that even if that Draco Meteor misses, there's not an immediate risk of taking a whole lot of ground type damage.
And Draco Meteor does connect, though, onto the Landorus. Not able to pick up thanks to that earlier parting shot. Landorus gets to hang on, and with Earth Power, you are going to be able to knock out Ko's Miraidon. Incineroar here is also going to be able to get off an attack, though. Ko's Incineroar getting to move first because of it faster. Knockoff finishing off the Landorus. Now it's Incineroar versus Incineroar, but James, remember, having a Helping Hand instead of a Fire-type move has no way to super effectively hit Ko's Incineroar. Knockoff, though, knocking off the Assault Vest on Ko's Incineroar, though.
Oh, the Terra Bug makes this so much harder for Ko. It was nice to keep the Incineroar safe from a potential Sand Seer Storm, but now it has to solo an Incineroar that resists knockoff. Sure, you can knock off that Incineroar right now, get rid of the Rocky Helmet, but with that chip, and with all of these knockoffs being neutral into the other Incineroar, things are very much in James's favor with that Terastallization having played out.
Absolutely, and I just want to emphasize how big of that parting shot was before. We are going to see Ko go for a desperate U-turn. A critical hit, though, is able to do a nice chunk of damage as Knockoff continues to go down into Ko's Incineroar. You know, Ko's Incineroar is faster. It can live one more Knockoff here if it doesn't critically hit. U-turn can go off into the Incineroar 2 more times, and with 2 more critical hits, Ko still has a way back into this game. I can't emphasize that enough, that this match is so close. It has literally come down to Incineroar v Incineroar with that parting shot from James sent on earlier. The Miraidon was not able to kill the Landorus, but no critical hit comes out there. Knockoff from James's Incineroar brings Ko's Incineroar down to its final legs.
I think maybe a critical hit could still do it for Ko's Incineroar. So Ko's put so much trust into this terrestrialization option on the Incineroar. There's one more chance for this match to flip on its head if there's a critical hit and a decent damage roll on that U-turn. So we'll have to see. The U-turn's coming out. Will it crit? Will it crit? No. Poor Incineroar. The knockoff finishing things off and securing a cleverly played game 3 from James Evans. That's going to bring James to top 4, having taken down the 8-0 player from day 1. Just an incredible player from Tsukide. James has got to be feeling great. Both of those players played it down to such a line. That was just, I have such a grin on my face. That was a spectacular match to watch.
That was a really good game, and I think with how explosives game 1 and 2 were, right, both players really locked in and were like, okay, we both know what our end boards need to look like. We both know the objectives of our game plans. How can I find a way around that? For example, Ko leading off with the Ursaluna to get that Flame Orb so that it can't get knocked off, as we saw, James fight around in game 2. But then also allowing James to still get the explosive pressure of the counter Shadow Rider and getting so much value out of that just to get it down to Incineroar versus Incineroar. I have a grin on my face as well, Hayden. That was such an amazing game, and nothing I would expect more from, the top 8 of the World Championships.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of these players really showing why, they have the same accomplishment in the past, a previous Seniors Division World Championship, and they're really showcasing that neither of those results were by any stretch of the imagination a fluke. These players are the best of the best. I don't know if I should say it this early. I don't want a commentator's curse, but I'm really keeping an eye on James Evans having beaten Ko Tsukide as he goes into this top 4. I think that's just such a phenomenal way to build up momentum playing this really tough matchup. And yeah, as you said, so many little technicalities, so many precise questions about how to get the most out of your restricted Pokemon. This matchup, just a masterclass in how interesting Pokemon games can get. Even with very tried and true compositions, the Calyrex Shadow Rider and the Koraidon, the Lunala and the Miraidon, there's just so much interesting things that happen when you're showing both players the ability to adjust so much into this game 3 that's so neck and neck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really do have the biggest grin on my face here, but that's not going to be the only match. The action is only going to continue to ramp up. As we take a quick preview here at our other top 8 matches going on, we got to play Giovanni versus Mao earlier. We just did James versus Ko, and there's still 2 other top 8 matches going on between Montana Mott, Michael Kelsch, and Hirofumi Kuruma and Victor Medina. And all those players are very, very talented. And I'm really excited to see who gets to move on to the semifinals, because I know those are going to be also amazing games.
Yeah, it's only going uphill from here. That was just the quarterfinals. And there's still the semifinals and finals left to go. This is how high the tier of Pokemon we're experiencing is right now, and it's just going to keep going up. I'm really excited for all of these players who have such a potential to be able to close out this tournament. I think both of those matches, as you mentioned, just some incredible players, and I'm really interested to see how this plays out. It really is anyone's tournament at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. But we are going to probably take a quick break soon after reviewing our bracket. The actions continue to ramp up, but don't go anywhere. Go check out the mainstream if you haven't already. It's continuing to ramp up there as well. But we'll be back with more action soon enough. Catch you later. We'll be right back.